some of you guys that aren't in the emission controls class, you can watch this anyway because you're going to get some good out of it. And what we're going to do is we're just going to give you a little bit of a bite on that. If we can make that happen. That thing right there must have a dead battery in it. All right, so your hydrocarbons are made up of hydrogen and carbon. That's basically your gasoline. And I don't want that right now. And the symbol is HC. That's one of your gases you're trying to equivalent. What does it look like? What does it smell like? If you got hydrocarbon coming out your back, what you going to have?
It's going to smell like
gas. Well, will it smell like gas every time you got hydrocarbons coming out the back?
Let me ask you a question. You know how, like these new cars and stuff, when you give it a lot of gas, it's got funky smell? What is that?
That's basically the byproduct of your catalytic converter doing what it does, right? When you see the black soot coming out the back, though, that's your hydrocarbons. And sometimes you can have, if it's rich enough, it'll be just pure raw fuel coming out the back like mist. Like if you put your hand on it, you smell gas. Also, when you're gassing up at the gas pump, you smell hydrocarbons. So that's your gas. That's what's best. That's the vapor and all that. There's as much explosive power in a cup of gasoline as there is in a stick of dynamite. So that's what we got right there. All right. So basically, you got your emission control device that pumps air into the exhaust on some of them. It's the air pump. I don't want that. All right. The air pump, the emission control device that pumps air into the exhaust system so the catalytic converter can reburn the pollutants in the exhaust system. Sort of a way, if you've got a fire that's trying to, go out, you blow air on it, it kicks up and gets burning, just burns some more. So if you've got it, particularly when it's cold, if you've got a rich running engine because it's cold, with a carburetor, you had to hit the gas and the choke would close, and then when you crank it up and the choke would be closed, and then with about 90 seconds it ought to be completely open. So basically, while all that was going on, even on those cars, they would have an air pump. The air pump that was spun by the pulley that everybody wanted to pull off there and throw away because they thought it was useless. What it was supposed to do was pump fresh oxygen in there when the engine was cold into the exhaust. And so those hot hydrocarbons that were coming out, whenever you put an extra oxygen with them, it would finish making oxygen and hydrocarbons unite. Because whenever fuel burns, oxygen and hydrocarbons get together and it makes CO2 if you got a perfect mix. So you're basically adding, you got some hydrocarbons coming out because it's running real rich, you pump some of that air in there, it helps to process that and turn it into something that's not quite so nasty. And that's what that is. Even nowadays, they'll have electric air pumps on vehicles. That one there is basically looking at a pulley-driven air pump, but for the most part, you're going to have electric ones nowadays that aren't driven by a pulley, and they're mounted under the fender somewhere. And sometimes they'll be mounted in a place where the water gets in them and all that. All right, so there's two pollutants conveniently lumped under one name, and I'm going to back that up for some reason or another. That thing tries to go 2 slides every time I bump it one. Are two pollutants conveniently lumped under one? Look at that, do it again. And so both are highly toxic, so you got oxides of nitrogen, and this right here, this X, the reason they put an X here, it really ought to be a subscript. It could be any number. So you got 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen in the air that we're breathing, right? So whenever it goes, when the temperature in the combustion chamber goes above 2,500 degrees, it links oxygen and nitrogen together in these poisonous compounds, and we really don't like that. One of them is nitrous oxide, like what you use for your hot rod, but only a tiny smidgen of them because there's all different compounds in there. And then there's laughing gas and all that, But they're highly toxic when they meet with the moisture in an ordinary atmosphere. They combine with it to form nitric acid, and that acid's corrosive and it's kind of dangerous, and we really don't need that. And so what part of our emission system takes care of oxides of nitrogen? Anybody know?
Catalytic converter.
Well, the catalytic converter does after the fact, but we want to prevent them from being formed at all if
EGR.
EGR, and on some of them, how do they do it if they don't have EGR?
They hold the exhaust valve open a little bit longer.
Yeah, but even then, some of them, like my 2001 Cherokee, did not have an EGR valve, and it didn't have variable cam time either. Came without it from the factory, and some of the Bronco 2s used to come without EGR. They just had a plate there from the factory where it was. If they can satisfy the requirements without putting an EGR valve on there, they're not going to. Now, when the EGR valve opens, this is the EGR valve over here. Please don't leave my class not knowing the difference between an EGR valve and a fuel pressure regulator, okay? That's just nasty. Because Well, I have known of people that did that. Is this my parts that I ordered just 2 minutes ago?
Yeah,
Yeah, just 2 minutes ago?
yeah.
All right. Well, if it's not at all, that's all I got to say. This right here is, let's see, a coil, yeah, that's a sponge. I gotta charge out, yeah, I gotta charge out your window regulator too, by the way.
He's gonna put one.
You took that paper over there, didn't you?
Yeah.
Because the business office? Okay,
She just said it was an estimate, so I didn't pay it.
yeah. Yeah, that's an estimate, that's right.
How much was it? How much is it gonna be?
About $83 plus 20% plus tax.
Thank you.
I think that there.
So about $100?
The I don't like you price was $200, you know. But anyway, so here we got EGR. Whenever EGR is flowing, what does it make the engine do? And when is EGR supposed to flow? Zane should know that. He's reading his phone. I'm sure he must be looking this stuff up.
Yep.
Don't EGR flow when the motor's cold?
The EGR does never flow when it does not flow when it's cold. It does not flow at idle. It doesn't flow at wide open throttle. The only time EGR is supposed to flow is with a warm engine when you're cruising or when you're accelerating. When you're idling, you shouldn't have any EGR. Now, on some of your diesels, it'll open the EGR when it's idling to make it quieter. But on a gas burner, if you open an EGR valve whenever it's idling, it'll run like trash. It's running bad because it's taking some inert gas from the exhaust and it's putting it in the mix, and that cools the combustion chamber down to keeps it below 2,500 degrees so you don't form oxides of nitrogen. Now let's see if this thing acts ugly.
Well, I guess I'm forming a lot of that because I don't have EGR valve on my car.
Yep. A storage device in the evaporative system is your charcoal canister. It's a little cylindrical or rectangular container. That's a sort of a dirty one right there. As a matter of fact, there's one, that truck that Tim drives has got a carbon canister that's clogged up. Now you typically have a filter to keep dust from clogging them up. That one right there, there's your canister vent solenoid on that one there. That one came off the back of an Expedition or whatever, you know. And so that's one that I was working on. I took a picture of it. It got activated charcoal particles and traps the gasoline vapors from the gas tank on older vehicles. If it's a carburetor, it actually traps some of the gas from the evaporating bowl in the carburetor too. And later they're purged and drawn into the engine when the vehicle is being driven. Now on older vehicles, whenever EGR, the EGR would only, the canister would only purge when EGR was flowing. So when you were cracked into your throttle, and on the older vehicles, like the ones with the carburetors on that had EGR, they would have a little thermal vacuum switch mounted in the coolant so that until the engine warmed up, the EGR couldn't get any vacuum. But they also had it teed into your canister purge so that when the EGR was getting vacuum, your canister would also purge at the same time. And so nowadays, the difference between the canister purge of old and the canister purge of nowadays is the canister is liable to purge anytime. And when it purges on some cars, you can hear it going if you're listening really close. Like I was talking about on my yellow Cherokee, when somebody changed oil, a lot of the times that canister purge solenoid would be mounted on a rubber mount, so they push it down here and it would get under the suction line for the air conditioner, and it would carry the sound of that purge valve clicking into the body of the car, and you'd swear the engine was knocking. Scare you to death. And all you had to do is just move that canister purge valve out there. But anyway, it's making a little racket like that, and it can purge you idling or any time now. And so what I'm saying is, when somebody packs their gas tank, click, 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 and they get too much gas in it, and basically, you know, they can make some liquid fuel go through the vapor line, and of course there's some valves to prevent that, but usually some will squeak by it anyway. And it'll go in there, and it'll do the, whenever it goes to purge it, it can cause the engine to almost stall and then catch itself and lunge forward at a red light and all that. When you're seeing that kind of situation going on, if you're sitting here watching the scan tool and somebody's complaining about that kind of thing, and you're watching the canister purge, when it starts purging the canister at idle, if the engine tries to die and kicks back up, you ask them, are you packing your gas? Don't pack the gas tank and you won't have this problem. I've seen that more than once. I've fixed it for people over the phone. I'd ask them, they describe that, and I said, are you packing gas in there? All right, here's another one. You remember Brian had his little vehicle, and when he would gas it up, it would sit there 20 minutes and it wouldn't start. Every single time he gassed it up. You remember what was wrong with it, why? Zane must know, he's looking at it on his phone right now.
The valve wasn't purging, and when it filled it up, it went the plug,
Yeah, what happened, well, yeah, the canister purge valve was wide open, and all that vapor that was being shoved out of that system from the tank was supposed to be stopped by the canister purge valve, but it was open all the time, and so it would basically push all that vapor in there, and it would condense in the intake, and his plugs would get wet for 20 minutes. He was in there going, "Ee," and he didn't wait a while until they dried off, then it fired up.
It probably held a lot of throttle.
Yeah, well, what he did was, yeah, that's right, he could have done that, but what I did, I said, we took the purge valve off, we brought it in here, and he says, how do we know it's bad? And I said, well, it's a little, just got a nipple on either side and wires, and I said, see if you can blow through it. And he went, yeah, I can blow through it. And I said, all right, let's energize it. Click. So now see if you can blow through it. I can still blow through it. I said, that ain't right. It's supposed to be, you're supposed to be blowing through it both ways. It's like a transmission solenoid, right? So we got the new one, and it was like, stopped up, put fluid in there, and blew through. I got a straw from Doc's the other day that had been too close to the end of the wrapper when it was sealed, and the end of the straw was sealed. And I stuck that darn thing down in my tea, and I couldn't get nothing. I pulled it back out, and I said, Jonathan Price has been here. He hit this with a hammer. All right, so, all right, let me see if I can do this. Now, that's what that looks like, and so,
What do you think that coffee straw was?
I don't know. Oh, he has actually, it was one of them little coffee stirrers that has the 3 little tubes that are all made together. You ever seen those? There's 3 little tubes that are about that long, and he picked it up and said, what kind of wires went through this? This must be some kind of a part part. I said, no, that's a coffee stir stick. Well, it looked real complicated. Anyway, carbon monoxide is what you get when the mixture is just a little bit too rich. Every one of the every one of the hydrocarbon molecules wants to get married to 2 oxygen molecules. If the mixture is right, it will have 2 oxygen molecules for every hydrocarbon molecule, and you'll get CO2. Now, if you not notice, the grass on the side of the roads and all grows so pretty, they got to cut it all the time because the CO2 coming out of your tailpipe's feeding the grass, and it's just growing to meet demand. That's how you go green. You make more CO2, not less. All right, so lack of oxygen or too much fuel. A high CO2 reading CO reading will result anytime there's insufficient oxygen. If the air filter's stopped up, if there's too much fuel going in there, if it's out of balance to the rich side, meaning there's too much fuel and not enough air, you're going to wind up with carbon monoxide. This is almost hydrocarbons, but it's sort of burned a little bit, but there wasn't enough, so you got CO instead of CO2. So you got CO1 is what you got. And restricted air cleaner, internal fuel leaks, or fuel pressure too high. Now, you'd be surprised how many times you get fuel pressure too high. We had that one Cadillac Escalade in here that the fuel pressure was 160 pounds. It's supposed to be like 70, you know.
I bet that ran great.
Huh?
I bet that ran great.
It didn't run that bad, but it turned on the traction control light. I'm serious. That's what the deal was. The traction control light was on. We plugged in the scan tool, got a network code. I says, go to the Cadillac place with this because we're not working at this time. So she went to the Cadillac place. They said it needs a fuel pump. I said, what? A fuel pump? We're talking about traction control. And they said, yeah, she said the fuel pressure was too high. They said, well, they wanted $1,800 to put a fuel pump in it. So I said, well, let's just go ahead and pop a fuel pump in it. Because we checked it, and sure enough, it was 160 pounds of fuel pressure. Got the fuel pressure right, traction control light went away, network problem code went away. I mean, it's not, a lot of times you feel like you can make this connection somehow in your head. And, you know, it's just weird. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now this right here is a device that has been on cars ever since about the early 1960s. The first vehicle I ever read about that had a PCV valve on it was the Corvair. And so what you got to do is you're going to take some vacuum and you're going to, like on this engine right here. Right here you got the PCV valve in one valve cover. On the other side you've got the closure hose. And the closure hose is basically getting clean air out of the intake stream. And one of the reasons they put this in the intake stream was so that the air that was being pulled into the intake with the PCV valve would be metered by the mass airflow sensor. You also getting good clean air. Now you remember seeing on these older vehicles, you might remember, where you got a piece of pipe going up to the valve cover, to the air filter, and inside there's a foamy thing.
Yeah.
That's the crankcase filter, because if the PCV system's working right, it will pull air through the crankcase all the time. You can put the wrong PCV valve on. Listen carefully to this. If you put the wrong PCV valve on that's flowing too much air, it can literally cause you to have a fuel imbalance, fuel trim imbalance. because somebody put the wrong PCV valve on it. So if you happen to notice somebody's put a new PCV valve on it, got a check engine light, fuel it, you know, the adaptive limit, go figure. Look into that. All right. Now then, let me see if I can. That one's not going to jump ahead. Whoop, it is too. All right, here we go. This is how your PCV flow looks. All right, you might notice right here, your PCV, you're going to have engine vacuum. See that right there? Your PCV, this one doesn't show a PCV valve, it just shows you the flow. And so basically, you got airflow coming in through that little air cleaner, going in here and being drawn into the intake. Now, I will tell you this, if the PCV valve is clogged up, it's so that it's not working right, the back pressure, which the reason you need PCV is some of the blow-by comes by the rings and you end up getting pressure in the crankcase. If you don't ventilate the crankcase, it blows all the dadgum seals. And we had one time that this guy brought this little Chevy Astro van in there, and it was just leaking oil from everywhere. The line mechanics jerked the motor out and pulled all the valve covers and all oil pan seals and all that, resealed it, and then they gave it to me to do, you know, to look at everything else, make sure it was okay. And I checked the PCV system, and it was stopped up on both sides, and that's why it had blown all the seals. See, the guy replaced the seals without finding out why the seals blew. And if he'd have taken it back out there, all those seals would have blown again. If you're the mad customer that paid the big bill and you come back and all your seals are blown again, you're going to want somebody to eat this, right? Got that? All right, so now I don't know why they got it checked yet, but anyway, fresh air from the air cleaner is supplied through the crankcase, and the engine's going to be consumed. They want all this, whatever blow-by is coming out of there, to be dealt with in the in the combustion process, which is kind of like an instruction process. All right. Now, I talked a little bit earlier about this air injection reaction, and it helps to reduce the emissions. On startup, fresh air is pumped into the exhaust manifold to burn off some of the excess HC that results from cold combustion and rich fuel delivery. All right, so you got filtered air, hydrocarbons and carbon monoxide, and then you got your treated exhaust. You can see that right there happening here. And it distributes air to each cylinder. That's what that does. See, and you got your closed loop fuel control. What's closed loop fuel control? Somebody tell me. Closed loop fuel control. What's an open loop versus a closed loop system? My wristwatch is really complicated, but it's an open loop system. It has no idea if it's right or wrong. Right?
Closed loop is where it's running off the computer, right?
It's paying attention to the oxygen sensor and adjusting the fuel. The loop is created because the oxygen sensor is looking at the after the fact burn, and it's adjusting the fuel and it just keeps going around and around doing that. That thermostat right there for our central air is a closed loop system. It knows when it's too warm in here and it shuts off the air. And whenever the temperature rises, it's when it's too cold. When the temperature rises, I was thinking wintertime, I guess. When the temperature rises, it turns the air on. When the temperature goes down to below whatever you got it set on, turns it off. That's your closed loop system. Anytime you've got a system that is checking up on itself and making adjustments automatically, that's a closed loop system. EGR system's a closed loop system. If you're looking at the DPFE sensor on a Ford EGR system, it can tell how much EGR is flowing. Now, some of them also not only want to know how much EGR is flowing, they want to know the position of the EGR pedal. You're going to see that in some of your electrode stuff. All right. Now, right here, let me kick it back if it jumps ahead. See it? All right. When the engine's warm to a specific temperature, the fuel system goes into closed loop. The air is switched either to the catalytic converter or the atmosphere. Now, when it goes to closed loop, the air management system changes. That's the point here. General Motors calls it air injection reaction system, right? The additional oxygen is pumped to the converter that helps complete the job that the catalytic converter is doing, which is a pretty interesting thing. When they first started talking about catalytic converters, there was a special kind of clay that they had to use to make catalytic converters. It was only found in some parts of Georgia. And they were saying, we're never going to be able to create enough of these. But what happened was the manufacturing industry went into high gear in these catalytic converters. There's some catalytic converters up there you guys can look at later. See those laid up there where I'm pointing my laser? One of them is actually cut so you can see what it looks like on the inside. And the other one is actually one that was coming apart. That was, if those come apart, they'll actually raise exhaust pressure and, cause you a lost power problem. And we'll show you how to figure that out later on because some of you guys are in Engine Performance 1. Okay, the conversion of HC and CO into H2O and CO2. So most people may not know this, I've said it a few times in class, you create a gallon of water for every gallon of fuel you burn. Did you get that? You actually create a gallon of water for every gallon of fuel you burn. Now, have you ever noticed in the wintertime when you crank your vehicle up and the exhaust is really cold, you got water coming out of the exhaust? Because the exhaust is cold and it condenses and it comes out as steam and drips. When the exhaust heats up to the point where it's vapor, you don't ever see it. Did you know that the most significant greenhouse gas is water vapor? I mean, that's the most significant greenhouse gas. Can't do anything about shooting down the clouds. I mean, you're going to have water vapor up there, right? If you're actually trying to do something with the gases and all. And I always like to say this too, if you take 100,000 molecules of atmosphere, 35 of 100,000 molecules is carbon dioxide, which they claim is a problem. One of that 35 molecules is man-made. But they're wanting us to spend $1 trillion a year to try to fix that. You know, did you know that wind farms have killed 3 times as many birds since 2010 as the BC oil spill? Nobody's talking about that. They don't care about the birds, you know? No, not as long as wind farms are killing them. Wind farms can kill bald eagles and everything else. Them big old things that a bird gets flies through, then it gets smacked by that propeller and just knocks them silly, you know? All right. Okay, now then, let me make sure this doesn't go. Your exhaust gas recirculation system, that's kind of an antiquated one right there. Right here, see that vacuum hose right there? Going through that ECM control solenoid. There's a solenoid the engine controller operates. What are you guys talking about? All right, reduces the emission of oxide of nitrogen. We talked about that earlier. So you're going to see on this engine right here, you're going to see a pipe coming up to the EGR valve. And basically when it's traveling through that pipe, it's supposed to cool that exhaust gas off just a little bit. And then it goes in, and anytime anything goes into the intake mix, they want every cylinder to get the same amount of air. They want every cylinder to get the same amount of fuel. They want every cylinder to get the same amount of EGR. Anything that's being delivered to the cylinder, they want it to be the same amount, typically, right? Now there are some anomalies in some of the newer ones. If it detects a misfire on one particular cylinder on some of the, you know, like 95 and up, it will kill the injector to that cylinder to try to prevent gas from going in there and damaging the catalytic converter and all that. But there's your exhaust gas recirculation system. And see, most GM equipped vehicles have a linear EGR valve, which would be that one there that you've seen that. It's an electric motor there. And it basically has got 5 wires going to it. 3 of them are for position, 2 of them operate the valve. Right? And that improves. You can actually go to your Chevrolet, the one like you drive, or the GMC, and you can go in there with a scan tool and you can command the EGR valve to open by percentages, and you can watch what the engine does. You know what I mean? So that's a good way you can check that. If you got a PO 401 code telling you you're not going to EGR flow, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to incrementally open that EGR valve and listen to see if the engine will idle rough, because that way you know it's flowing. And whatever feedback mechanism it has may be lying to you. All right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but that's what it looks like right there on that one right there. See that one? That's it right there. And that pipe right there carries exhaust gas into here. That's on this engine right here. And then you notice the throttle body is right here, and it's feeding it in there like that. Some of them will actually feed the EGR through little small ports that go into each cylinder. Some of the Nissans do that. Some of the Ford 3.8 liters and Windstars used to do that. And if all of those holes are stopped up except for one, if all of those little ports that feed EGR, the one that's getting all the EGR will misfire. Seen that before. Had to pull the intake off and clean those out. And one of this guy that was here, Jesse James Duke, that guy's got a picture out there. Me and him were driving his mom's Nissan pickups. He goes, this thing's surging. And it was surging. And I said, let's unhook EGR and see if it still surges, because a lot of times EGR causes it to surge for one reason or another. So when we did that, the surge went away. But it turned out that he had some little ports feeding each cylinder, and all of them but one were stopped up. And so what he had to do is just clean those out, and everything was fine. Okay, has anybody got any questions? Or any comments at all? Did you turn into a skeleton? I'm going to make a badge up here just yawning up a storm. Everybody all right?
Stayed up all night.
Yeah. All right then. Well, we're going to go to lunch now. We're going to close our doors first though.
Yeah, that'd be all right.